back, 938, Talk Radio 930, WTAD. I'm Mary Griffith, The Mary Griffith Show, brought to you by Hilby Auto Body. We just heard from Nashville-based filmmaker and Catholic Chris Foley, and now his partner in crime, or I guess in sainthood, Jon Graham, is joining us. Good morning, Jon Graham.
Good morning, Mary. How are you?
I'm wonderful. I let Chris introduce himself. I'll ask you kind of the same question. Tell us about yourself and how you got involved and interested in the Father Gus Tolton story.
Well, I don't know if we have enough time for both of those answers, but I've been a filmmaker for a few years. I'm working on a project of my own called Kind Katie, and I got involved with Chris. We met at a concert in Nashville. We were both standing in line for concessions and just struck up a conversation and found out he was a filmmaker. He found out I was a filmmaker. We started talking about our projects and decided we were going to try to help one another. He is an incredible screenwriter, so I handed my scripts to him to doctor up, and he has done a tremendous job on that. But I had also done a regulation crowdfund campaign and raised about $100,000 for my film, and he was intrigued by that. And so I started sharing some of what I knew about that process with him, and that's kind of where I got pulled into it. I have there's a regulation crowdfund portal called True Crowd that reached out to me before Chris and I ever met, and they are based out of Chicago. They asked if I would help them find faith-based film producers and projects to try to walk through this process. So that's kind of how this all kind of synthesized, and Chris's film Across, the more I heard about it, I thought, man, this is a slam dunk of a story because it's so timely for everything that's going on in our culture, and it elevates the Catholic story to a place that it hadn't been in a while. I tell others, you know, in Hollywood, you're either an exorcist or a sex offender if you're a Catholic priest, and there has to be a whole lot done to make that right. And Father Tolton's story, man, it's so powerful. And I just got excited about it, and I said, let's work together. So we both are kind of helping each other on each other's projects.
Well, the proof of concept film of Gus as a Boy, we talked about that with Chris Foley, how that has already been made, filming there. From some shots from Hannibal and Brush Creek, but a lot of it done with a leaky boat in Kentucky Lake. But you're hoping to turn it into a full-length feature film, and I guess that's where the funding aspect of it comes. To me, this is such a compelling story and has such wide crossover appeal because not only do Catholics care, but I would think every person who's black would care. Now, we know that a lot of American blacks are members of the Baptist or Protestant faith. And so they don't embrace the Catholicism of Gus Tolton, but they can certainly embrace the story of escaping from slavery, then being persecuted again, and having to go to Rome to get his education. The folks in Quincy helped him a lot. Quincy was very welcoming to the family, but there was still that wall of prejudice that was here. And then, of course, he ends up in Chicago. We, of course, in Quincy want to try to capture as much of that Gus Tolton market from Chicago as we can. And we're thinking about having a shrine here. We already have the building picked out. So there's a lot going on. There's a pilgrimage to Father Tolton's gravesite, which is in Quincy tomorrow. Starts at 9 o'clock at St. Peter Church and goes pilgrimage to 33rd in Main to the cemetery where he's buried. So I've been telling people about that throughout the week, so I think we'll have a lot of people join that pilgrimage. But you're on a pilgrimage to raise money for this. Why do you have to do so much fundraising? Why can't a major motion picture company just want to make this film?
Well, whether they can or not, that's not really the best question, because they certainly can. Unfortunately, stories of faith tend to get looked at with a raised eyebrow a lot of times. There are folks that are like, you know, well, I don't know if the audience will come out. I really feel like Chris is in line, though, with the Father Gus Tolton story, to really draw the eye of the Hollywood set. But as it goes in filmmaking, obviously, before anybody's going to look at your story, you have to have an attachment, something that is an actor that is well known, something that is sort of a safe bet for a Hollywood studio to throw their money behind. And so that's really the idea of the initial funds, is to get enough funding together to where folks, we can then say, okay, we can set up what's basically, it's called a pay or play, but it's essentially a contract on promise with a well-known actor. And Chris has got some great ideas lined up for some of the potential actors, and it escapes me at the moment what some of those are, but I know Kevin James is a possible character in the film. Just some great ideas. Anytime you can get the funding available to talk to an agent to get that person lined up as a possible participant in your film, that's when the Hollywood studios go, hey, this looks like we've got some promise here.
Too bad Oprah Winfrey's too old to play Martha Tolton, because we can get her in it, get her behind it. But Chris Foley did tell me, Jon Graham, that he has a bright young African American actor to play Gus as a boy, and that film is that part of it has already been shot, and that young man's been in other movies, so he is soon to be well known in Hollywood circles. It's kind of like getting your first job. Well, I can't hire you because you don't have experience. Well, how am I ever going to get any experience if I don't get my first job? So I guess we're finding out it's a lot tougher than just having a great story and a great script to get something like this done. Why not get funding? You mentioned the Catholic Church is definitely in need of some kind of, after Spotlight, which was a great movie, but that was about everything that's wrong with the Catholic Church. It seems to me that the Diocese of Springfield or the Diocese of Chicago or the Catholic Church in general would throw some money your way in order to make this enriching story about, surviving slavery, achieving. Although I tell you, there's parts of this that the Catholic Church doesn't look so good at. But, that's, again, the churches are only made up of human beings. So the prejudice that Gus Tolton faced was not unique. I mean, it wasn't certainly unique at the time. There was a lot of that going around. So what part of the film do you think is the most catching? Because this escape from slavery with gunshots firing is going to be a lot more thrilling than, say, Father Gus walking a beat, in Chicago and dying of heat stroke at a very young age. That's a great story, but that doesn't have any cops or robbers or any violence in it. So are you gonna have to jazz it up, or can you stick with the truth and make it sellable?
Well, the real story is the totality of his life. I mean, certainly he had a dramatic childhood, and it led him into some places that folks would never expect he could go and come back from. And so I think the powerful totality of his story is really what draws the viewer in. Chris gave a great explanation to me one time about why he calls the film A Cross. And, of course, he had to cross the Mississippi to get out of slavery. He had to cross the Atlantic to go to Rome to become everything he felt God calling him to be. And then he crossed it back to go back in America and suffer the same persecution he faced beforehand. But in a very much larger sense, he carried a cross his entire life. And that is really the point of the story, is that this man went through such hardship simply to fulfill God's calling in his life. And so we're excited to bring this story to screen and can't wait. I'm just delighted. You mentioned the Protestants. I'm just a good old Southern Baptist down here in Atlanta and know so little about Catholicism. Every time Chris and I have a conversation, I'm running over to Google and I'm saying, okay, what did he mean by that?
I didn't realize you weren't of the Catholic faith. Okay, so
that's right. Yeah, so,
you're perfect. I mean, you understand that this story does transcend just the Catholic tradition. Yeah, it's interesting.
Absolutely.
It's interesting. Two white guys are making a film about a black man. I mean, and there again, people say it's hard to, Oscar's so white, etc. It's hard to get films made. It's ironic to me that two white guys are pushing this. Hopefully you'll get some funding out of prominent people in the black community, and maybe you'll have some prominent actors that will want to sign on to be part of this if they know the story a little bit more. The story needs to be told.
Yeah, I think that really is indicative of Father Tolton's life. If he was able to go to such great lengths to get the story of the cross told, to get the story of the gospel told, despite the persecution. Who are we not to take the challenge of saying, we've got to tell this man's story, we've got to get it out there? And no, we're not black, and I'm not even Catholic, but we can see the synchronicity of all of our stories coming together to get his story told, and it's really a privilege. It's a joy to be a part of it, and we're hoping to blur those lines, to diminish the differences between white and black, even Protestant and Catholic in some respects, because we're hoping to really help folks see what a life of sacrifice looks like.
August 11th is when they're supposed to have the screening here in St. Rose Church in Quincy. And so far, 4 screenings of the small short movie Across, the Gus Tolton as a Boy story, will be shown there on that August 11th. Obviously, you're out hawking and wanting to raise money, Jon Graham. I'm going to make this statement. I don't endorse you in any way. I don't know you. So, I mean, I'm not saying, I'm not telling everybody to send you money, but I'm going to give you the opportunity to let them make up their own mind and make the plea. If folks are interested in getting this Father Tolton movie made, how do they go about throwing some of their financial weight behind it?
Well, Regulation Crowdfund is a new approach to raising funds for films, and really for any startup business. Came about a couple years ago, and folks can invest as little as $100, and all the details are available if you follow the links at Chris's website, acrossmovie.com. But essentially, instead of a typical crowdfund where you would get a T-shirt or a DVD, you can put about the same amount of money. I like to tell folks for what a family of 5 can go to just go see a movie, because we know that's a pretty expensive affair. They can actually take that cash and invest it in a film and have it be made. And there are several perks that go along with it. But the bottom line is people get behind stories they believe in, and I think if people will go to acrossmovie.com, if they don't know, I'm sure your listeners are much more informed about Father Tolton than the rest of the country, but if folks will go to acrossmovie.com and study his life, they'll see how valuable this story is, and they'll be able to be a part of the process.
We are I think a lot of people around here, just because we talk about it a lot, are very familiar with his life in Quincy. We're not so familiar, I think, with what happened to him after he went to Chicago, except that he died very young. He basically expended himself in the service of others. What is one thing about his life in that Chicago time frame that you think is so important that you definitely wanted to be part of the movie?
Well, I have to be honest with you. I'm not as familiar with those levels of his life as I'm sure Chris is, as he's been such a biographer behind him. But I will tell you, the conversation that I was able to have with Bishop Joseph Perry of the Archdiocese of Chicago just made it so crystal clear that this is somebody whose story needs to be told. And I would refer folks back to that video. It's on our Facebook page at Faith Film Fund. That is all one word, Faith Film Fund. And Bishop Perry did such an amazing job outlining the qualities that make him worthy of being named a saint in the Catholic Church. And so, forgive me for not giving you a direct answer, but I can tell you that there's so many different aspects of his life that are so powerful, and just the courage that he faced. We think that just because slavery was abolished by Abraham Lincoln, wink wink, forever ago, that he suddenly didn't have any more persecution. But I did learn that the Catholic Church themselves were hesitant to allow him to come to seminary. They were hesitant to allow him to have any involvement in the American process of priesthood. And so that's why he had to go over to Rome to get accomplished what he hoped to get accomplished.
Yeah, he was very much beloved here, and the Franciscans and others took good care of him here in Quincy. But yeah, they hit their heads against the brick wall too, and so it's interesting because there's black Catholics obviously all over Africa, but that's fine. Keep them there was the attitude. Black people in America still can't be going to our schools. We have to be segregated. So it's an interesting story to say the least. My favorite part of the Father Gus story is he worked at a cigar factory. I think that shows that no matter what you do for a living, you can still become a saint. So if you can roll a cigar, you can become a saint in America. That's the... I don't know if you can become
already a saint in my book.
Oh, don't let those Southern Baptists hear you talk about that, Jon Graham. You're not supposed to be smoking those cigars. Jon, we've got to let you go. I just want to thank you so much for giving up your time. I know that your artistry as a filmmaker, thank you for being willing to pair up with Chris Foley and try to tell this story, because I really think that this is going to be the kind of thing that is going to bring tens of thousands of people a year to Quincy, Illinois, to our Father Tolton Shrine that hopefully will be opening up here soon in Quincy. We have a place for it already. Quincy's kind of poised. The tourism industry here is poised to embrace the story of Father Gus. We just got to get him up to sainthood and get him on and going so that everybody comes here, just like Medjugorje and Fatima, etc. So thank you for your part in helping out, and hopefully someday we'll get to meet in person, and we'll have you on the Mary Griffith Show live and in person, okay?
I would be delighted, Mary. Thank you so much for your time, and I do want to encourage everybody to mark their calendar for August 11th to be at St. Rose Church for those screenings. It's just going to be a fantastic day.
Thank you so much. We'll put it in our community calendar as well. Well, that's the Mary Griffith Show for today. We're going to take a break, and when we come